This week on the Big Nose podcast, I am delighted to be joined by an old classmate of mine, Gavin Mcguire. Gavin has recently returned from Tokyo, Japan, where he was a key member of Team Ireland's coaching team. As long as I've known Gavin, he's been associated with a game of table tennis, getting a schoolyard nickname to match.
I guess in primary school and growing up through there, it's seen as an uncool sport at that age, so you get a lot of slaggings and, you know, oh, there's table tennis boy, whatever.
Gavin takes me back to where the journey all began and the influence of family.
And my mother kind of said, "You're going to try this?" I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Yes, you are." And went on and on for a couple of weeks, but eventually she more or less forced me down there.
Gavin is very honest and frank throughout our chat, reflecting how the path less travelled isn't always the most supportive.
Everybody in my life, as supportive as they've been, they always said, "When are you going to get a real job?"
Determination paid off, and Gavin explains why he set up his own company around his sport.
That's why I started Table Tennis Provider, to bring back access to table tennis.
The move from player to coach has seen Gavin take on a role with para-athlete Colin Judge. Gavin speaks to me about Colin and their journey together so far.
He uses that uniqueness to build his own profile and to be the happiest man on earth when you might think he has all the world's challenges in front of him, but he's happier than you or I are any day of the week.
Gavin was in a unique position where he was able to attend the games alongside his girlfriend Ellen KEANE. Both Everton professionals, he shares with me the lengths the couple went to in their preparation.
That all the sacrifices that she made mostly, or we made as a couple when she kicked me out of the house 3 weeks before we went, so she could isolate and focus.
I chatted to Gavin about the joys of Tokyo 2020 on a personal level. He shares with me what it was like to witness Ellen winning gold in the pool.
Like, obviously it was an extremely proud moment and I was delighted for her, and I may even have shed one or two tears.
All that and more to come this week on the Big Nose podcast. Gavin, it's very welcome to the show today.
Hi Pierce, thanks for having me on. Times like this I really wish it was a TV show so that your viewers or listeners could see the shirt you're wearing, because it's given me energy for this podcast.
As I alluded to in the intro, you know, you had a big role to play in Table Tennis Ireland in the Paralympics this year. But let's go all the way back to why you decided to get into table tennis. How, as a child, that most of your peers probably were kicking football or rugby ball or more interested in Gaelic football. How did you find yourself picking up the paddle and getting into table tennis?
It was a strange one. Right from the start, I was always a sporty kid and I liked to try my hand at most things or anything that I could find. Table tennis was something that was in my family to some extent. Racket sportswear, table tennis, badminton, tennis, they were all kind of prevalent in our family, whether it be cousins or whoever.
Yeah.
And a cousin of mine was in the Leinster team and in a local Clontarf table tennis club called EXPLANS at the time. And my mother kind of said, "You're going to try this?" I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Yes, you are." And went on and on for a couple of weeks, but eventually she more or less forced me down there. First
What
night,
age are we talking?
I was 8 at the time.
Would it have been around in the family before that?
Yeah, so everyone in my family had tried their hand at a minimum.
Yeah.
And then my cousin obviously was in the Leinster team. He was very good at table tennis. So yeah, forced down. First night there, and that was it then. I was hooked. So
You really got into it then. Well, I suppose, as I said, you know, your peers probably would have been playing with the local football team, the Gaelic team. Was that something that you felt you were missing out on, or was it something that...
To a certain age, I played a lot of sports anyway. I kept up Gaelic football with Parnells and football with St. Martin's and Donecarney. I played badminton also at the time, or I had taken up badminton a year later. So I was trying my hand at a lot of things, and football's always been close to my heart as well anyway. I still keep very up to date with, not so much in the playing sense, but in terms of viewing. So yeah, it was a strange one, I guess, at that age, and going up through school, being the one who played table tennis, you know, when...
that's kind of something that, you know, what was the reaction of your peers? Because obviously, you know, it was something that was different, so maybe you kind of had to explain it to those who were around you.
Yeah, my best friends always kind of didn't ask too many questions. Actually, they were always just interested in what made me happy or what was best for me, and they didn't care what I did. But I guess in primary school and growing up through there, it's seen as an uncool sport at that age, so you get a lot of slaggings and, you know, oh, there's table tennis boy, whatever, and that was fine. I didn't really care. It was water off a duck's back because I love table tennis and continue to do so. And to be honest, all that kind of going against the grain and doing what people didn't do, that for me, that's what built my character today, and exactly, it forced me a lot of determination, and I feel that stood to me to the day. So
yeah, it must be like, as I said, if you sometimes stick out a little bit, it's always kind of a case of two fingers. See, I'll keep doing this because I get the enjoyment and the satisfaction. I like it, and I don't care really what you say about it. I imagine though, back in the 90s when you were starting off in table tennis, the facilities probably weren't there, the infrastructure, the supports, the governing bodies probably weren't as prevalent as we find today. So in terms of trying to getting into the sport, okay, you had the sport in your family, but was the facilities that you had back then incomparable to what you have today?
I don't think the facilities have dramatically changed in minority sports across the board. That's a big problem, funding and having the right facilities to play, having a place to train all the time, whether it be in the national team or down to the club scene. So with time, of course, things have improved, but it's still a massive issue to get table time or to find a club nearby. I'm in a privileged position that the club that I play for now, UCD, because I went to university there as well, they have a full-time table tennis hall and residing in Blackrock College. So I have access whenever I want, but there's not very many people in my position in the country, especially the up-and-comers, who are trying to do something or trying to maybe become professional one day. It's I
think, as you said, across minority sports, you see that, where the big focus goes into the larger sports that kind of capture a bigger demographic, and it's something that, like a sports like yourself, maybe badminton as well, will be something similar. But in terms of where you're at, in terms of, you've gone through the younger age group in the schools and stuff like that, and you obviously went down, you played, and you obviously, someone looked at you and said, okay, this guy is better than most kids his age, and obviously you went on to represent Ireland at a young age in the schools. What was kind of that like, going from just a sport you played, maybe starting off at 8, to all of a sudden being picked out as someone who could, be a star of the future?
I wouldn't say that I really realised at the time that I was maybe what you say a star of the future. At that time, I was just really excited with the opportunity to go away. Like, there wasn't many kids my age, or many kids growing up at all, whatever age, that were going away to represent their country in Ireland, to going into Europe, going into Belgium, France, Germany, throughout all my teen years. So, or before even, I played for Ireland when I was 9 in Scotland. So there wasn't many people doing what I was doing.
Mad, but like, to go and say, okay, I'm representing my country on an international basis as a 9-year-old, you're probably too young at that stage to understand.
Yeah, it didn't really sink in until I was probably 10 or 11 what I was doing, to some extent.
Yeah.
And I always remember one silly conversation with a friend, Mark O'Flynn. He told me one time we went to Belgium as the national team, and I was struggling in a match, and I remember him shouting, "You're doing this for your country." And it's so cheesy and so corny, but then that was the moment it clicked what I was actually doing, and I got even more nervous and I lost really, really quickly. But then it started, the importance of what I was doing started to build in my mind.
That must have been a huge learning curve at the very beginning, because all of a sudden you're gone from playing as a Joe Soap, going down to the local club, to representing on an international level. That must be just so steep of a learning curve, and all of a sudden the ramifications of whether winning or losing is not just for you, it's for your team or whatever. That must be difficult as a young person to...
Yeah, difficult in terms of maybe the burden or whatever, but I always was confident in what I was doing. So I knew at times if I was coming up against someone that was too good or better, it was the system. It wasn't that I didn't want to train hard enough, or I wasn't training hard enough. I didn't have enough opportunity to play or train enough. And when I came up with people my own level, I always backed myself. So I kind of thrived under that bit of pressure or that bit of competition. Something I've had throughout my whole life, and it stood to me.
Yeah, it's something that, especially maybe in an individual sport, you need it more than most of you, or a team sport where you can rely on others. Yeah, it's something that's quite interesting.
It's a lonely place when you're playing bad, put it that way.
Obviously, as you get older and the hours of practice become more needed, as you find that you're now representing the country on an international stage, you obviously need to increase, you need to get more table time, I suppose is the phrase that you'd use. But you also had to go to school, you also had to have friends, and you also had that family life. And striking a balance, do you feel that it was tough at times for you back then, when you were maybe going into secondary school perhaps, and you needed to be practicing more and more?
I never found it too difficult. I would say I didn't manage my time fantastically. My schoolwork was the thing that suffered, but at that time I was happy to let it suffer.
Yeah.
I always knew I was clever, I knew I was capable, and I could do well in school if I applied myself, or could do better in school, put it that way.
Yeah.
But table tennis was what I wanted to do and what I was planning to do for my career from an early age. You know.
When did you? When was the moment? Was there a moment? I suppose not. When was the moment? Was there a moment where you said, "Okay, this is something that I want to do for the rest of my life"?
Yes, I wouldn't say not a defining moment, but one of my best friends within the sport of table tennis, John Murphy, he's now the head coach of Table Tennis Australia, headhunted. He was Table Tennis Ireland's national coach. He started the journey. He started the path for all the players in Ireland. He was the first one that went and played professionally, and I just followed him. I watched him, and I wanted to be like him, and I wanted to do what he was doing. So I followed in his footsteps. Maybe then I think a couple of players followed after me, and that kind of started a domino effect, I guess. But watching him and growing up close to him, a few years behind him, that was what really triggered me into the career in table tennis. And he was never good in school, not even close to what I was in school. I hope if he's listening he won't mind me saying that. He didn't care. He knew that he was going to make it in table tennis, and I knew that I was clever. I could have a fallback option if I needed it, but I wanted table tennis.
It really kind of comes across as, you know, you were stubborn enough to, you know, forgo whatever you could do on an academic side, possibly, and this is something that you really you had a graw for, as they say.
Yeah, well, I have to say, like, everybody in my life, as supportive as they've been, they always said, when are you going to get a real job? When are you going to, like, cut down on the table tennis? When are you going to start to go put more into your college work or whatever you're doing? And the same in school. It was, when are you going to come play football? Why are you wasting your time playing table tennis? I didn't listen to anybody. I was just so set in my ways and what I wanted to do. I was driven from the beginning. So, and they all, as you said, they acted as influences for me to just keep pushing, go further.
But it is stubbornness as well, like to just keep, you know, one vision, and sometimes that's it. As you grow up, as we all know, there's distractions that come along the way. You need sometimes just to have that focus, which obviously you have had all the way through your career. And, you know, you took the road less taken, I suppose, in terms of that way. And like you said, some people start asking the question, when you're going to get a real job. That must be sometimes a little bit kind of, you know, piss off and leave me alone. This is a real job, and don't be kind of talking down to me. Absolutely.
Like, my parents included in that, by the way. They were always at me, when are you going to get a real job? My dad was a builder, when are you coming on the site with me, whatever. And I had no interest. I literally was, if you're not with me, I'm sticking two fingers up at you and I'm going to prove you wrong. And it's a little bit twisted, but all I wanted to do was show people that I could do it, and you were the one who told me I couldn't, and look at me now.
And you know what, it did pay off, because doing a little bit of research, obviously growing up with you in school, and I was aware of what you were doing and, you know, what you were achieving in school level, and you went on. The list is quite long in terms of accolades in the sport of table tennis, and, you know, I could be here all night, the podcast could be an hour long.
You'd have no listeners by the end of it.
Probably not. So there's a lot of accolades, you know, national, and I just wanted to kind of get a sense of, maybe giving the listeners a sense of when you achieved your first win, or maybe your first tournament, when it went from maybe a case of you were just practicing, now you're actually entered into a tournament, it was an official tournament, and there was judges and there was maybe a crowd. Do you remember that kind of?
To a certain extent I do. I don't remember my exact first experience, but I remember my first tournament. It was down in the IWA in Clontarf. For my first year playing table tennis, I didn't enter any tournaments. I went between the years of 8 and 9 just training.
Yeah.
When I was 9, then I was allowed to enter tournaments. So I went down. I remember playing. I lost all my first matches in the group stage. I lost them all. Didn't care. I would just remember being delighted to be there, and I cried a couple of times after losing, but it was very quickly gone when I knew I could play another match.
Yeah.
But then you moved on from the group stage into what was called the plate competition, which was basically the Losers' Cup, put it that way, for want of a better word. But I then came runner-up in the plate competition, and so I received a trophy at my first tournament, and that was probably another moment where I wanted more. It is somewhere in the garage at home in my parents' house. It definitely still lives on, but I couldn't pinpoint it.
Yeah. Then obviously a national championship comes about, and you're in that, and that's a different level altogether in terms of, you know, you're taking on your peers who have probably been around the game longer than you?
Yeah, well, the Nationals was always the biggest tournament of the year. It was the one that everybody built up to, the one that everybody talked about, and it was the one that if your name was on that cup, you were somebody in table tennis.
Yeah.
You look at the list of winners now, and it's just so prestigious, and there's only real champion of champions on that cup who've done it all and seen it all. And my first one actually came as a massive surprise. When I was 18, I was a complete outsider. I would have been like 7th or 8th in the seedings, and I actually beat John Murphy in the final, who I spoke about already as someone I admired massively. He was going for his 3rd in a row. I think he was quite nervous when he got into a winning position against me. Suddenly realised I'm going to win 3 in a row here, and then it collapsed on him, and I came back and won. Not to say I didn't play my part in that, but
you saw the finish line?
Saw the finish line too soon, and I captured the title then. And at 18, I knew what I had done, but it didn't sink home with me until I won my 2nd national title 5 or 6 years later. After having a spell in Germany playing full time as a professional, I needed to work a lot harder to win that 2nd title. The first one came about as a little bit of luck to a certain extent, and then I had a lot of downfalls after that. I hadn't hit the highs that I thought I had. I was just lucky at that tournament.
It must have been a high bar to set, you know, in terms of going and winning it and beating, you know, an opponent that you admired, and then going back to it and maybe not wondering why didn't it work this time.
Exactly. Yeah, that was one of the toughest points in my senior career, and it came very early as a 19-year-old after winning at 18. When all of a sudden the expectation was massive, and there was people looking at me going, this is the new number one, you know, he's taken John Murphy's pedestal. But that wasn't the case. It was never the case, and I was naive to believe that was the case and listen to people. And it took a few years to really get over that and solidify myself at the top of the list as the real number one.
And one of the things I noticed with doing a bit of research is that, you know, I didn't realise it was doubles or, you know, team events, but you have won a lot as member of a team. And can you maybe, how does that differ in terms of winning it on an individual level and then winning as part of a group or a team?
For me, I loved table tennis because it was an individual sport and I was responsible for my own success to a certain amount, but then being able to share it with guys who were doing the same thing as you was always the best for me. Going to the World Team Championships with the lads, that was the pinnacle of what my career, and that was what I enjoyed the most. And there was 4 of us that were in that national team for probably 10 to 12 years together. John Murphy moving from player to coach, but the other 3, we remained as the men's team for a period of 10-11 years. And
must be some camaraderie to be mixing with the same guys and working and
incredible, and
traveling, I suppose, as well.
None of us appreciated it as much as we should have, and it's only now that I've obviously stepped back from international play that I really realise how much I value that and how good an experience it was and how good a team we were. Because now, following us, we've all stepped away from international table tennis, and the team is in dire straits. You know, the youngsters are good and they're trying their best, but they're not at the level that we were, and it's going to take some time before they are. And I think that's a shame in minority sport. We weren't respected enough that people didn't really realise, well, these guys are playing up to 28, 29, 30. It's unusual in the sport of table tennis because it's so underfunded. People generally would kind of quit around 21, 22 when they start to move into jobs.
That's a very valid point, because I imagine, as you know, as a national team, and as you're saying, there was more senior people playing at a more prolonged level than most other nations would probably have, as you said, the up and coming. You were having success as a team. Why do you think there wasn't maybe that spotlight put on the sport that should have been, realistically?
To be honest, I think it was just taken for granted. That's the real thing. That's the real problem with our specific situation. I believe that Table Tennis Ireland and anybody watching us just thought, well, there's the lads out there doing their thing, but if they weren't here, the other lads would do it. You know, the guys would fall in behind, but actually that was never the case. There was, I hate to sound big-headed, but there was no one even close to our level at the time.
And the structures probably weren't there to bring up the levels.
No, you had to go away. You had to become a professional player abroad if you wanted to succeed, and we were the only ones that invested and really went for it for over a number of years rather than a trial for a year or 6 months or whatever.
Yeah, And maybe one of the stranger questions you'll get asked today is, do you remember the last tournament that you were in?
One thing I do remember from my last season was the Ulster Open was the only Irish domestic tournament that I hadn't won.
Yeah.
I had won the Nationals 3 times, I had won the Munster Open twice, I had won the Irish classification a few times, and the Ulster Open always evaded me for some reason. I lost in the final a number of times, and I just thought that I couldn't win up there. Yeah, eventually in my last season I finally got that title under the belt. Not that it's the biggest title of the year, but it was just one that I was chasing for a long time. So that was a big one as well. That was a big one to hold that cup and have that picture, and to know that I've won the full set in Ireland. That was my last memory, I guess. Exactly, yeah.
You alluded to it earlier on. You know, you've spent 3 years there playing, constantly, and this helped in terms of performing your game. What did you learn about yourself, about the game, different parts of the game when you were in Germany there?
I would say the main lesson I learned in Germany was how difficult it was to find those small percentage improvements. That it took those 3 years to become maybe 5 or 10% better. You know, people think that you go and become a professional, you train for 1 or 2 years, and bam, you're top 100 in the world. It doesn't work like that. It's dedicating yourself over a long period of time with the right diet, the right training plan, the right physical program, the right amount of hours, the right match program. You have to have so many different things in line and correct just to make those incremental gains. And that was the biggest learning point for me, how hard it really is to get to the top of the game, top in any sport. But I always compare table tennis to golf. The depth is incredible. And it's when you've got a country like China in there, who their national sport and their population,
figures stack up in their favour, don't
exactly, yeah. So it's a tough one.
On that, on a previous podcast with guest Megan O'Neill, she was a musician, and she said she had to get out of Ireland to learn about her craft. And it sounds to me that because we're such a small island, and outside of maybe any financial supports, but as a sport, to understand it better and to improve it a lot more, it is essential for anybody who wants to be at the top of the game to get off this island.
Right now, it is impossible to become a high-level table tennis player if you don't move away. Absolutely impossible. You can become a high-level junior, but once you get to that senior game, you have to go away and get a higher level of sparring at a minimum. If all the other things I mentioned, sports science, diet, everything else, you can do them from Ireland if you have the right backing and funding. But the level of sparring and training partners, we don't have that here, and unfortunately we're a while away from having that here.
You did have a decade or so on the Irish senior team, and there must be some memories or takeaway stories that you could share with some of the listeners about maybe times you were travelling, representing Ireland on the international stage, donning that green jersey. Do you have any great takeaway memories?
To be honest, it sounds, again, it's probably going to sound cliche, but looking back now, it's just that camaraderie that we built up as a team, and living that life with a group of guys. There's just nothing like it, and I can't put it into words for the listeners, but it was the biggest privilege of my life, and it will always be the biggest privilege of my life to have done that and to have explored the world with these same group of people. I probably shouldn't, not because of your podcast, but I probably can't share too many of the night out stories because we've got a few wild ones, I would say.
What goes on tour
exactly
stays on tour,
exactly.
But what's the best city or place you visited as a group?
As a group, the best city we ever visited was Tokyo. I know I was there recently, and we'll probably touch on that shortly, but we were also there in 2014 for the World Team Championships, and a few of us decided that we would also stay for 4 or 5 days afterwards for a holiday, because you're in Tokyo, and it was the end of the season, so we stayed 4 or 5 days afterward, explored everything, Mount Fuji, the Shibuya crossing. We did absolutely everything you could do in 4 or 5 days, and that was the absolute best place I've ever been.
While playing was a big part of your journey, in more recent times you've begun to give back to the community that helped raise you in the sport, starting your own coaching company, Table Tennis Provider. What moved you to do this?
Well, I was working with Table Tennis Ireland and Table Tennis Ulster at a time as like a development coach, and then more recently as a national para coach, but it would never make up all of my, like, a full-time job, unfortunately, because of funding and whatever else. So I always had to have private coaching on the side and doing small jobs here and there. So I just wanted a way to formalise that. I always saw what I was doing as something that I could grow. I could grow my private coaching business, but I also saw an opportunity to get into schools, build a brand in Ireland when there's absolutely nobody doing it. Table tennis is a fantastic game for school kids, and why table tennis is not freely available in all the schools is not beyond me, but it just takes someone to go and do it.
Is it history, maybe, with the GAA the way they are?
I think that's part of it, but you wouldn't have, my parents or your parents maybe, I think they all have an experience of table tennis, whether it be in school or in a local church or a youth club. Yeah. There's not many from 40 to 70 or 40 to 80 that you can say table tennis to and they've never tried it. They always have tried it in school or wherever. But then there was a period during our time where table tennis just became extinct in schools. And obviously we didn't go to churches and youth clubs. That became a thing of the past.
Yeah.
So the accessibility to table tennis just went down the drain. And that's why I started Table Tennis Provider, to bring back access to table tennis for the people of Ireland. I'm starting very small in Dublin and in small areas, but the goal is there to bring it to the island.
In terms of Table Tennis Provider, what services does it offer?
A range of services. At the moment, private coaching, schools coaching, corporate coaching, they would be our main areas. I am looking to get into the equipment business where we start to sell tables, and that comes with the plan of getting into schools, getting them our tables, and equipment is obviously the issue there. But yeah, right now schools coaching is our number one, and that's what we're trying to, I guess, attract schools to get in contact if we haven't got in contact with them already, to try and get a coach in there and get kids playing.
Get them young, that's what they always say. That's what the GA always did. You get them young, get them in, and you'll have them for life. Maybe something that I always find difficult. I play golf, as you know, and I play golf in a peculiar way. I have an unorthodox swing, but it works for me.
And dress sense. I've seen pictures.
And dress sense. We won't talk about that. How did you adapt, or how did you find adapting from the player who knew what you were doing to going and coaching and imparting knowledge and advice to somebody who was at maybe a different level, or varying levels depending on who was in front of you?
I have to say, I said it earlier on about the pathway. That always was something that I really focused on when I started to become a coach. I was interested in it as a player. I was interested in helping others to follow my journey and to try and follow in my footsteps. So that became a really easy transition to go from player to coach, because it was just a formalised way of doing that and providing opportunities. That's always something I've loved to do, and helping kids or shaping kids into young adults. It's something that I take pride in.
Yeah.
And on a more selfish level, I didn't always have to be the one competing to be competitive. I wanted the people that were working with me to win as much as I wanted myself to win. And when they won, I took my gratitude, or I got my kicks out of that. I got what I needed out of them winning. It didn't have to be me.
Well, your excellent playing credentials and the development of your coaching portfolio, becoming high performance coach for Table Tennis Ireland must have been a great moment for yourself in terms of being acknowledged in the sport. Yeah,
para sport was something I was never involved in. I couldn't have told you the first thing other than guys in wheelchairs play. I was so naive to what it was, so naive to what it was capable of, and the people inside it were capable of. But a job came about to become the Irish para standing coach, and only for standing players. I saw that application. It was a 1 day a month contract. It was nothing, more or less. But I saw a potential opportunity there to maybe go to a Paralympics one day and put that on my coaching CV. So again, from a selfish point of view is why I started, or I went for the job. But very, very quickly, I realised how amazing the people are in parasport, be it the parents, the kids, the gratitude levels that I've experienced from coaching kids in parasport to coaching kids in able-bodied sport is just completely different worlds. One word of advice to a kid in parasport and it's thank you so much, you helped him, you helped little Johnny, you made his day. And you might not even get a thanks after a 9-hour slog in a training camp with an able-bodied camp, so
possibly a reflection on humanity.
I think so, to a certain extent, but it was just they never got the support, and I felt that as a player myself in a minority sport. I didn't get the support to fulfill my career ambitions as a player. Kids in parasport even more so. They're so neglected in so many ways, and that's then, I guess, where that determination came in again, where I wanted to to help people on that pathway and show them that there was something that they could do within sport, and just to have a better life by being involved in sport.
So what did the role entail? Did you have to come up with, training plans? Did you have to...
Yeah, so at the end of the day, I was high performance coach. So my real job was to work with our only high performance athlete, Colin Judge.
Yeah.
And then to create a pathway for other para players to follow and hopefully go to Paralympics down the road. But it quickly became also a development role. There was so little structure there. There was so few players that we had to do something at grassroots level as well, irrespective of the high performance role. Yeah. So it was getting in touch with as many people as possible, putting the feelers out there, getting to know people, a lot of networking at different disability events, and we went from a squad of 4 at my first para camp to a squad of 45 by my last para camp.
Wow.
So that might be that in para sport, finding kids to play disability table tennis, that's huge growth. So
I suppose one of the reasons I got you on to chat was because I wanted to know what the experience was like for yourself, first of all, and then as part of a Team Ireland coaching team, and just Team Ireland, I suppose. What was Tokyo like this year?
Well, as I told you earlier, Tokyo was the best place I've ever been, but it was very different this year. We weren't allowed to leave the village, so we were very restricted in what we could do. But Paralympic Games, like no other. It was the first multi-sport event I'd ever been to in my career as a player or a coach, and that was incredible in itself, to see so many different people, so many different shapes and sizes, sports, facilities, whatever. That was incredible in the first place. And then just how organised the Olympics or the Paralympics is in terms of how they run that show. I have no idea. It's a well-oiled machine, and the Japanese were incredible.
But if you wanted one nationality to run something well, I suppose the Japanese have a stereotype of being quite organised.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, when I really look back, I don't think anybody could have ran a COVID Games other than Japan, or maybe Germany might have fallen into that bracket, but I don't think anybody else could have run a COVID Games the way they did.
The discipline required to stick to the rules.
Yeah, and the level of volunteers. There was 5 volunteers ready to carry your bag at any moment. There was just so many people giving their time to make it a success there.
As coach to Colin, you would have an insight to him as a player, and as an individual you obviously spend a lot of time together, on and off the table tennis. Perhaps for those who are maybe unfamiliar with Colin, maybe you might be able to give us an insight into who he is, how he is as a person, and how he got on at the Olympics and Paralympics this year. Yeah,
so Colin is a 26-year-old table tennis player, and without going into medical definitions, Colin has one arm. So he's missing his right arm and his 2 legs. Quite a unique disability. You'll often find amputees missing 1, maybe 2, but to be someone missing 3 is quite unique, and that just kind of adds to his character. He uses that uniqueness to build his own profile and to be the happiest man on earth, when you might think he has all the world's challenges in front of him, but he's happier than you or I are any day of the week, no matter what's in front of him, which is a testament to him. And just an incredible athlete, an incredible guy, and his dedication to the sport is much greater than mine ever was.
Really?
Just level of application. I would say he's one of the cleverest guys I've ever met, but also one of the stupidest guys I've ever met. I hope he's listening to that one, because I say that to him all the time. Just application levels like no other. Ready to train 24/7. Like any time, any day, any place, he'd be there.
And obviously leading into the games, and they were obviously postponed games. How did you prepare for this? This is the pinnacle for a lot of athletes going to it. How did you, as a coach, prepare Colin for it?
It was a tough one, because Colin, again, going into the politics of parasport, there's a classification system. So Colin became European champion in Class 2 wheelchair table tennis in 2017. Just actually when I took over as national coach, not unrelated, but that was just when I took over. Then in 2018, Colin was reclassified into a higher category of Class 3, which would be against more able competitors, so guys with less disability, and Colin would be one of the most disabled in his class, for want of a better expression. Then we went from looking at, we're going for Paralympic gold in Tokyo, to we just need to qualify now. We're up against it to even qualify and even be there. So there was lots of things we were dealing with over the couple of years, with COVID thrown in there, with trying to qualify, and the nerves and the disappointment going from that expectation to now my dream might be dead here. I might never qualify for the Paralympics.
So the goalposts really changed.
Completely shifted. And when you're a kid that's grown up his whole life dreaming about that Paralympic Games and that Paralympic gold medal, to then know that because of my disability I may never get there and I may never even get close to that medal, and it was a decision made by somebody else.
So that did change the expectation going to the Games?
Absolutely, yeah. Completely changed our expectation, and we've really shifted to Paris as our real goal for medals or big results. Tokyo always became about getting there, getting the experience, and if we got wins or if we got results out there, happy days, but they weren't what we went for as such.
And has that planning begun already for Paris?
Yeah, the planning is well underway. Colin's on holidays at the moment, but once he gets back, we'll have a debrief about Tokyo, and we'll start to put in place the training plans and what we're going to do together to get him there and to get a medal. And I believe he's capable of it. So he's got to make a few adjustments. He might not like them, but that's what we've got to do.
That's your role as a coach, I suppose. Yeah. In terms of the Paralympics, you had another interest to keep an eye on while you were over there in Japan, and that was of course progress of a certain swimmer. How did you manage that, the emotions of all that going on, and being able to focus as well on what you had to achieve for Team Ireland?
Well, for any listener who doesn't know what you're alluding to, obviously I'm with Ellen Keane, who became a gold medalist over there. But both of us are extremely professional in what we're doing. There was never a case of we're a couple, we might get excited over there and be spending too much time together, unfocused. That was never a possibility with the kind of mindset that we both have and the professionalism that she has, which again outshines anything I ever did. Yeah, so in terms of focus, that was never an issue. But Colin had a match postponed on the night of Ellen's final. Right. So it actually meant that I was able to go and watch the final. That experience was like no other. I was so nervous, like stone in my throat the whole way through. It was actually the first time I'd ever seen her swim because of COVID. We got together during COVID, and that I became like a little child in the arena because it wasn't my arena. It wasn't where I was confident and I was watching and I had no control. I didn't even really realize what I was watching. You know, when
you were kind of, I shouldn't say a fish out of water in terms of it wasn't your discipline.
Yeah, exactly, and you have an insight into exactly what you're watching when it's your sport, whereas I don't know if how fast she was going was fast enough. I don't know where she should push a little bit harder. I don't know where she should be gaining or losing time. So all of that inside knowledge that I would have in my own sport to be a comfortable viewer, I didn't have any of that.
I suppose the realisation of when her name went up and it was first, what was that like for you?
For me, like obviously it was an extremely proud moment and I was delighted for her, and I may even have shed one or two tears that nobody saw.
Water spraying
it was. But to be honest, she went there to win gold, so it was always something that she was not expecting, but knew that if she performed in the right way, that's what she was going to come home with. So it was just, I guess, fulfillment in that moment, that all the sacrifices that she made mostly, or we made as a couple when she kicked me out of house 3 weeks before we went so she could isolate and focus, it was just fulfillment and justification.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people were surprised with her reaction and the interviews that she did initially after. It was like it hadn't sunk in, and I suppose it probably takes a long time for things like this, but it must be maybe coming home was probably more when it sunk in. Yeah,
definitely. And you're in an arena with no fans either, so there's a lot less emotion over there, and not until she did the homecoming in Clontarf did it really hit her, and she got emotional herself. That, I guess, when it sunk in. But to be honest, I think it's been a 13-year slog for her to get to that medal, so in many ways it's a relief more than anything else. I knew I was capable of that.
What's next for yourself?
Next for myself is a harder break, a little break from the game, and then back into planning with Colin, and I'm looking at taking on a new coach and table tennis provider in the near future, so then starting to get back into the schools if COVID allows in October.
Well, I wish you the very best of luck, and send our regards to Ellen as well, and to Colin. What a great performance it was, and to you as well. Best of luck with all the coaching, best of luck with the business as well. I'm sure we'll see some some people at the Olympics in the future who started off in a table tennis provider sometime soon. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
No problem at all, Piers. Thank you very much.